Part 16, The Last Loose Ends Then. The Empire of Shadowstein then decides to tie up some loose ends on Earth to truly complete the story of the planet and its saga within the greater story of existence and of their empire. The darkest King Mordecai goes back down into the former state of Maryland, which, since the year 2124, has been under the control of the Kingdom of Lioness ever since a time anomaly occurred within the state, and darkest King Mordecai decides to summon his good old undead army and go for a good old conquest to tie up this loose end which never ended up amounting to much of anything in the grand scheme of things. Darkest King Mordecai then summons his army of undead, and they begin their march towards the Kingdom of Lioness, ready to lay waste to the kingdom and take it back for the Empire of Shadowstein, as it once was theirs, and as such, still rightfully is theirs. And when they arrive, they find the entire army of Lioness, led by now King Dimitri, waiting there, ready to face them. Darkest King Mordecai smirks, "So it seems you've been expecting us. Well, you should have just given us what's rightfully ours and saved us all this trouble." King Dimitri steps forward, his sword held high. "We did not seek this war, but we will not back down from it. We fight for justice and the freedom of our people."
Darkest King Mordecai chuckles darkly. "Oh, how quaint! You fight for justice and freedom. Well, we fight for what is rightfully ours. Very well, then. Let us see which path to righteousness leads us all." The undead army advances upon the Lioness forces, their rotting limbs and tattered cloaks billowing in the wind. The clash of steel and the cries of battle fill them. Here, as the armies engage in a brutal and unyielding struggle, darkest King Mordecai rides at the front of his army, his skeletal horse snorting steam and smoke, its eyes glowing with an unholy light. King Dimitri, upon his mighty steed, leads his army with equal fervor, their battle cries echoing across the field. The forces of Lioness fight valiantly, determined not to let their homeland fall back into the hands of the undead. As the battle rages on, it becomes clear that both sides are equally matched in strength and determination. Darkest King Mordecai then conjures a dark staff and, using it, unleashes a wave of darkness which then envelops King Dimitri. And when the wave of darkness fades, King Dimitri is little more than an undead, a powerful undead at that, but still just an undead. Darkest King Mordecai laughs maniacally, reveling in his victory. "You were a worthy opponent, King Dimitri, but now you shall serve me as one of my most powerful champions." He gestures to one of his necromancers, who approaches Dimitri and begins to study him intently. King Dimitri struggles against the control of the dark staff, his eyes burning with anger and determination. "I will never serve you, Mordecai," he spits. "I will find a way to break free from this curse." Darkest King Mordecai then instead uses the staff to fundamentally change King Dimitri's ideals, to show him how serving the light is actually the evil thing to do, and how the light has always only caused destruction and chaos, while in darkness there has been peace and order, and yet, in claiming such, Darkest King Mordecai is telling no lies. As the battle rages on, Darkest King Mordecai's words begin to sink in. King Dimitri, once a paragon of righteousness, now sees the world through new eyes. He looks upon his own soldiers, once loyal to a cause they believed was just, and now realizes the futility of their struggle. He looks upon the forces of the Shadow Empire, once his enemies, and sees them not as monsters, but as victims of the same lies he had once believed. King Dimitri then casts off the title of king, and returns once more to being Prince Dimitri, and then lets the darkness within and around him win, ascending into being Dark Prince Dimitri. Dark Prince Dimitri, with a newfound purpose, leads his army to join forces with the Shadow Empire, and together they continue their march, leaving the Kingdom of Lioness in ruins and rebuilding it, not in the image of the light, but in the image of the dark, bringing about an age of order and peace, free from the tyranny of false ideals. Then, Darkest King Mordecai decides to seek out the grave of Emperor Thoric I of Frosthaven in Europe, then calling the Demon Lord Legion to him to take revenge on the man both for originally stripping Mordecai of his necromantic powers, and for distracting Legion back when he was the massive demon, and leading to him dying from a mere volley of arrows, which he is still embarrassed about even one 405 years later. They arrive in Europe, deep in Danish mountains, and find the tomb. Then, Darkest King Mordecai resurrects Emperor Thoric the First purely, so he and Legion can take some revenge on him. The man who stole my powers and set me upon this path of darkness. Mordecai spits venomously as he gazes upon the undead Thoric, chained to a nearby rock, and the fool who distracted my Legion back then. Leading to his untimely death, he gestures to the Demon Lord, Legion, who towers over them all, his massive form seeming to ripple with anticipation. Legion then breathes a fire of hellfire below Thoric Eye, while Darkest King Mordecai then shifts his dark staff into a dark bow and fires a volley of dark arrows, tipped by Legion's hellfire, into the chained Frosty, now undead Emperor's chest. The dark arrows pierce Thoric's icy flesh, sending shards of ice flying in every direction as they strike. The Emperor lets out a pained groan, his expression twisted in anger and disbelief. You foolish fools, he cries, struggling against his chains. You have no idea what you have unleashed. No, what you have unleashed. Your actions led to so much death and pain and suffering for so many people. Darkest King Mordecai responds. Demon Lord Legion laughs maniacally. Oh, such is the way of the world, my friend. To claim that one's actions have not led to suffering is the height of hubris. No, what we seek is not revenge, but balance. We shall bring the light to its knees, and in doing so, we shall restore harmony to the world. When Thoric Eye tries to retort, Darkest King Mordecai then cuts him off and silences him, before then casually saying, "We're done here, Legion." Torch him so intensely that even in the afterlife, all he will be able to feel is scorching pain. The Demon Lord Legion smirks, "As you command, my king," and raises his arm. Pointing his claw at Thoric Eye, a stream of hellfire shoots out from it, engulfing the former emperor. The flames dance around him, reflecting off of his chained body, and the sound of crackling flesh and bone fills the air. Mordecai watches impassively as the flames consume Thoric Eye, until there is nothing left but ashes, also nearby, revealed by the fire melting the ice. Darkest King Mordecai finds old beings summoned by the Empire of Frosthaven all that time ago. Of course, the less impressive Frost Worm and the Frost Phoenix, but more majorly and impressively, the Frost Titan and the Earth Colossus. Oh, and there is also the Inferno Phoenix. And there is even the Elemental Guardian, the very first genuine summoned elemental, and he imagines that, if it weren't for how its fate unfolded, that the Storm Leviathan would also have been here, having originally been summoned alongside the Frost Titan, the Earth Colossus, and the Inferno Phoenix. He looks over at the Elemental Guardian, the very first summoned elemental, and he can't help but wonder if he could somehow manage to convince it to join his cause, or at least not stand in his way. He takes a step forward, reaching out to touch the elemental, feeling its power and majesty emanating from it. "You were the first, the very first of your kind," he says softly. "You were meant to bring balance to the world, to stand as a beacon of hope and justice. But instead, you were used as a weapon, a tool of destruction. I can give you that purpose once more. I can give you the chance to make things right. Join me, and together, we can bring balance back to the world." He notices that the thing is dormant, like the others. Unlike the Storm Leviathan, they were little more than mere tools, now dormant without a controlling force. Darkest King Mordecai then unleashes a wave of darkness at all of the beings, corrupting them with darkness and reawakening them. He also combines the two phoenixes together to turn them from being the weakest to being arguably the strongest of the beings. As the darkness recedes, a new form stands before them. The Frost Worm and Titan Earth Colossus, Inferno and Frost Phoenix, and the Elemental Guardian, now bonded together as one being. the Elemental Lord, more specifically, the Elemental Dark Lord. Darkest King Mordecai grins, pleased with his handiwork. So, you are the Elemental Dark Lord, HM. I have a proposition for you, my new champion. The world is out of balance, and you were created for a purpose to help restore that balance. Join me, and together we shall lead the Dark Empire to a new era of dominance, where balance is restored and the world is once again made anew. Darkest King Mordecai then realizes that there is still more elemental power to be harnessed and fused into his new creation. The avatars, over 100-foot tall embodiments of elemental forces, including the avatar of the waves, the avatar of the winds, and the avatar of the dragon flight, having been involved in both God Emperor rituals, and they currently remain likely dormant within the USA. So he, with all of those accompanying him, including his new creation, head to the USA to Megacoda to locate the dormant avatars. And Darkest King Mordecai considers this to be so major that he calls the other two members of the Darkest Ones, Darkest Queen Lilith and Darkest Lord Lothar, as well as dark matter scientist Erebus, and even his Emperor Darkest Emperor Alpha down to Earth as well, to partake in the searching. But mainly, he just sends out his most elite minions, Geralt the Lich King, Legion the Demon Lord, and Isolde the Vampire Queen, to locate the dormant avatars. They finally find them within a hidden chamber beneath a volcano, and Darkest King Mordecai, having already been to the USA before, knew of their location, and so they invade the chamber, fighting their way past the countless elemental guardians, before finally reaching the three avatars, each sealed within their own crystal prison suspended in the air. Then suddenly a strange, concentrated blizzard appears within the structure, pushing out the strongest of them, leaving only the basic forces, whom are then decimated faster than the eye can follow, leading Geralt the Lich King, Legion the Demon Lord, and Isolde the Vampire Queen to go in there to investigate. When they arrive, they find themselves face to face with Lady Winter, the former leader of the armies of New Hampshire before that state became a part of the Empire of Frostreach, which she thusly joined, and even was part of the God Emperor ritual of God Emperor Aldrich. Her eyes flashed with a fiery determination as she assessed the intruders. "You shall not pass," she declared, her voice echoing through the icy cavern. This chamber holds the essence of the avatars. Their power is not meant to be wielded by the likes of you. Isolde the Vampire Queen, the only one capable of keeping up with her impressive speed, suddenly rushes at Lady Winter, supported by the undead army of Geralt the Lich King, and the fire and lightning of Legion the Demon Lord. As then Lady Winter quickly readies her icy blade, Geralt the Lich King, unfazed by the cold, summons forth a wave of undead soldiers, led by Isolde, while Legion the Demon Lord unleashes a torrent of fire and lightning against the frozen walls, trying to weaken them. Lady Winter, seeing this, quickly creates a shield of ice around herself, protecting her from the elemental assault. "You'll not break me so easily, fiends!" she cries out, her voice echoing through the chamber. "I have faced greater threats than you." With a swift motion, she sends a gust of icy wind towards Isolde and her undead army, pushing them back momentarily. She then powers up, going from just Lady Winter to Queen Winter to Empress Winter to even Goddess Winter, her icy powers and physical attributes increasing in order to match her trio of opponents better. Geralt the Lich King, still unfazed by the cold, commands his undead army to attack once more, while Legion the Demon Lord summons forth a demonic wyvern, which breathes fire at Lady Winter, trying to weaken her defenses. Even as Goddess Winter, Lady Winter still finds herself overwhelmed. She then takes a deep breath. An intense blizzard begins to swirl throughout the chamber, pushing back her trio of opponents, as one of her signature wind shields forms around her, and then the blizzard begins to concentrate around her and merge into her wind shield, which shrinks more and more around her, until eventually both merge into her, and she opens her eyes, which are now glowing blue and below 0 levels of cold. And her voice is now echoey and just as cold as her eyes are. She has now ascended into her ultimate trump card, True Goddess Winter. I have seen the end of time, and time has seen me. She declares, her voice booming through the chamber. Your petty struggles mean nothing against the inevitable. Surrender now, and I shall grant you a swift death. Fight, and you shall face oblivion. True Goddess Winter then moves faster than her. Trio of opponents can possibly react and slices Isolde, the vampire queen, in half at the waist. Geralt the Lich King then immediately communicates to his master, the Darkest King Mordecai, of their opponent's sudden seemingly infinite increase in power, and of Isolde's injury. Darkest King Mordecai, Darkest Queen Lilith, and Darkest Lord Lothar then enter the chamber. Darkest Emperor Alpha deciding to stay behind until he's truly needed for now, leaving his 3 closest advisors to see what they can do here. Dark matter scientist Erebuster. Erebus then enters the chamber after them. Meanwhile, the elemental Dark Lord is waiting outside of the ruins themselves as it was instructed, awaiting the avatars to be fused into it. Geralt and Legion are taken aback by Lady Winter's newfound power. They look at each other, their eyes reflecting a mix of fear and determination. Despite the odds, they know they must press on. The Darkest King Mordecai steps forward, his eyes gleaming with malicious intent. Darkest Lord Lothar then approaches True Goddess Winter, his own blade clutched tightly in his hand. And even he finds himself outsped by True Goddess Winter, but not enough to the point that he is completely and utterly unable to react. And thus, a duel between the 2 fastest and most skilled and powerful sword wielders in the universe begins. Geralt the Lich King then uses his powers to attempt to slow down True Goddess Winter, focusing his magic on her sword, making it heavier and harder for her to move and swing, as he tries to give Darkest Lord Lothar an opening to strike. Even then though, True Goddess Winter still holds the speed advantage, and their magic is powerful enough to cancel each other's out. Darkest Lord Lothar finds himself on the defensive, his sword playing nothing but a blur as he desperately tries to keep her sword from connecting with his body. He knows that he cannot maintain this defense forever, and he must find a way to break through her defenses and land a killing blow. He also knows that even he would be unable to endure to many subsequent blows from her in a row, but any amount that he could survive, he could swiftly regenerate from. Meanwhile, on the ground nearby, Isolde the Vampire Queen sliced in half. Body begins to regenerate itself back together unnoticed. Darkest Lord Lothar sees this and takes advantage of the distraction, attempting to strike a blow on True Goddess Winter while her focus is elsewhere. His sword flashes through the air, aiming for her unprotected side, but she is too quick and agile, twisting her body out of the way just in time. The blade slices through the air mere inches from her flesh. Darkest Lord Lothar then begins charging up the charged attack, leaving True Goddess Winter confused as to why he would use such a predictable attack that she could dodge so easily. As he nears his destination, Lady Winter, sensing the intentions of the Darkest Lord Lothar, quickly turns her attention back to him, narrowing her eyes in concentration. The air around her begins to shimmer and crackle with frost, her powers building up for a counterattack. Then, suddenly, Isolde the Vampire Queen, having regenerated, comes out of nowhere and grabs True Goddess Winter from behind and holds her in place, preventing her from dodging the likely fatal charged attack. Then, Darkest Lord Lothar unleashes the charged attack, launching the ball of dark and lightning and electrical and storm, energy and magic from his sword towards the restrained and off guard True Goddess Winter. As the ball of energy hurtles towards her, Isolde the Vampire Queen, still holding on to True Goddess Winter, closes her eyes and prepares for the impact. Bracing herself against the force of the attack, she knows that it will likely be fatal, but she is determined to protect the one she loves, even at the cost of her own life. The explosion of the blast completely shatters true goddess Winter's body and has reduced Isolde, the vampire queen's body, to mere pieces and chunks of flesh. Loth-Ar's attack has done its job. He watches with a mix of satisfaction and regret as the dust begins to settle. He knew that his attack would be fatal, but he couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt for killing one of his closest allies, and the one person who had shown him kindness in this dark world. Then the decapitated head of Isolde, the vampire queen, begins talking. Anyone want to help bring my parts back closer together so I regenerate faster? Isolde the vampire queen's head asks. Then everyone remembers, oh yeah, she's a vampire. Of course, Darkest King Mordecai responds, Dr. Erebus, please gather the pieces of Lady Isolde and place them together as close to her body as possible. The mad scientist nods and begins to collect the scattered remains of the vampire queen. Then, once they are placed nearby each other, Isolde, the vampire queen, then pieces her body parts back together and casually regenerates the insane damage each of her parts took from the blast. Well, that was different. Darkest King Mordecai says with a mix of awe and amusement. The elemental Dark Lord then punches a hole in the top of the chamber and looks down. Then Darkest King Mordecai fuses the shards of Lady Winter True Goddess Winter into the elemental Dark Lord, before then fusing the avatars as well as their crystal prisons into his creation as well.